Hi, I wanted to get on here and post a video focusing on the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. I had a subscriber uh, suggestion a couple days ago, and it's been something I've been thinking about, especially with this last times. So what I want to do is I want to go through an overview of those books and give you my perspective on things, and it's completely different than what you've heard before. So if you've been studying these books and you think you know everything, well, pay attention, listen to this one, and it's a little bit different than what you've heard before. And anyway, let's look at Daniel. Daniel's a book that's really controversial, and I agree with the controversy as far as when it was written and all that stuff. And I tend to listen to the atheistic scholars on that one. I don't agree with them when they're talking about how they conclude that it had to be written in Asmonean because of the prophecies being too accurate. And I find the atheistic scholars doing this an awful lot. But anyways, all that said, I tend to listen to atheistic scholars more than the apologists, just because it's useful information. But I don't take everything they say um, completely, and they draw the line when it comes to prophecy, and they simply can't tolerate it. So, but let's look at Daniel because it is a prophetic book. So I want to look at it on that merit. Is it a prophetic book, and can we discount it just simply because it's been shown to be a bit of a forgery? I don't think so, because I want to look at the 70-week count. That one's really the key to understanding this book. But this also want to look at chapter 11, because I think both of these tie in precisely and perfectly with Revelation. So chapter 9, we all know the 70-week count, and if you've been studying it, you know all the different interpretations, the different dates. And the one that I go with, it's the 457 one, because it lines up perfectly with the timing with the Jesus coming at the end of the 69th week around 26, 27, then him preaching and then being just cut off in the middle of that week, just reading it just like it reads, and then he's cut off. Okay, so end of it. He didn't fulfill it. It wasn't this vision wasn't sealed. The land is still, in a wasteland, as it is today, and so nothing was fulfilled. But let's look at that count because I think it repeated a second time. I believe that's the reason why you have this 62 and a 7-week division. And it lines up pretty well the first time Jesus came, okay. But the Hebrew, according to the Hebrew, what these rabbis are saying is that the Hebrew says that the Messiah comes after the 7-week. The way it's written is it implies that the Messiah actually comes after the 7th week, the 7-week segment. So this count happened a second time. In 1535, the Ottomans made a decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. They rebuilt them from 1538 to 1541. And let's take that times table right there and take a look at that. Take the 62 weeks, add it to the 1535, and you get to 1969. Exactly 2 years prior, Jerusalem was reunited with an Israel, and the the section of the 62 weeks was fulfilled completely, perfectly, and it makes more sense on the second count than it does on the first, because why would it take 62 weeks the first time when Jesus came? But the second time it does make more sense. And so the 7 weeks, what about that? At the end of the 7 weeks, we had this sign in Revelation 12, and this is where it starts. This is where it links up with Revelation pretty well. In Revelation 12, there's a sign, an astrological sign, in the sign of Virgo, a sign of planets in Leo, along with the stars of Leo, the sun and the moon. Sun is at the head, moon is at the feet, and so this whole arraignment was something described. But what was really interesting about that arrangement, was the it was that Jupiter was in the belly of Virgo for just over 9 months, the normal gestation period. And so what the sign was saying is that Jesus is born naturally, not coming in the sky, not coming in the clouds, floating down, but that he's born naturally. And so that's what I believe. We can read Revelation along those lines, that Jesus is born naturally, and so you can find in Revelation a storyline of this human Jesus. He comes first. You see him as a child being caught up and to heaven. Then you see him on a horse, a white horse. He's got a crown He's got a bow, and he goes out conquering. Then you see him at the end of Revelation. He's got many crowns, and so he's been on this earth during those 7 years. Not so according to Revelation. Now I want to go back to Daniel and say, does this line up with Daniel? And I'd say it does, because when you look at Daniel 11, you see at the very end of Daniel 11, and he comes and he pitches his sea, he pitches his tent between the seas, and that's when Michael comes in chapter 12, verse 1. That's the next verse. Michael comes. So it lines up along the same lines. What happened when America planted its tents between the seas in 2018? The sign of that Virgo sign was 2017, 9th of September. No, the 9th, the 23rd of September, 2017. So it's all right around that same time. And so that's the end of the 69th week. And according to Daniel, Jesus is here right now. According to Revelation, I believe the white horse is Jesus, and he's on that horse right now. And so when you look at, taking a look at Daniel, let's go back into Daniel. Let me look at Daniel again. Look at the chapter 11 with the little horn. Really, if you center on that little horn, from chapter 36, from verse 36 in chapter 11, you see a description of the personality of that little horn. He's arrogant, boastful, all that stuff. And it does fit pretty remarkably with Trump and what he did. And when Trump came along, he was confirming a covenant. It's our American covenant, MAGA. And 3.5 years later, he did break that covenant. And so he is a type of Antichrist, but he's not the Antichrist. And so I'll get into that with Revelation when I talk about Revelation. And also with this going back to, is America the little horn? Okay, look at the 10 kings, the toes, that come out of what I believe the statue. I kind of follow along with a lot of the Christian apologists that say the statue is Babylon and Greece and Persia and Rome, and then the Rome evolves into the 10 toes. And the 10 toes to me are the European countries that did have kings, actual kings, and the little horn is the latecomer to those 10 kings, and it subjugates it overcomes 3 of them, and they're uprooted. They're uprooted out of the land and taken out. So who could those 3 kings be? And I believe they are Spain, Britain, and what was it, France? The 3 kings that we had to defeat on our American soil, not in the Netherlands because they didn't join the war. So those are 3 kings, and they actually do have kings who were subdued by the little horn. So when you're following my logic, then the little horn in Revelation, in chapter 11, is all talking about America. And when it's talking about the personalities, it's all talking about, you might as well say Trump, because it does. Trump was the president then, and he was the one that did those things. So whether he's president now, or if he does become president again, it even emphasizes the point that this guy is who it is. And anyway, let's look at Revelation now. Revelation 12. How does Revelation 12 line up with Daniel? Okay, so like we said, the sign of the virgin perfectly coincides with that 69th week. And so we're talking about, in the Revelation, is kind of the book of Revelation is telling the story of 2 messiahs. It's talking about both advents. It's talking about Jesus coming first and the second. And the first advent, you could kind of read that into chapter 12, and how that in chapter 12 you see a child being caught up to heaven. Well, you could call this and assume that this is the resurrection or something like that. And that's not a bad idea to assume that might be true, at least in one aspect of it. The woman is pursued by the dragon. A flood pursues her. She runs to escape a flood. It's talking about diaspora. And then she's given these wings of an eagle and given a place to fly off into the land for a time and a season while this thing blows over. And I believe that's talking about America, and how the whole history of the Jewish people was they were pursued, they were chased out of the land like a flood, and that they eventually settled in America, and that's where they are at right now today. That's where most of them, or the majority of Jews still live in America, I believe. And so that part of the prophecy seems kind of clear to me. When you go into chapter 13, it now describes these two beasts that come out of the sea, or out of the earth. And the first one that comes up, I do believe, is probably talking about the Catholic Church united with Rome. It's not really describing um, it could describe the Roman emperor worship, but I don't drop the mic on Nero and say, well, it's 666, and Gematria says that, but Nero didn't fulfill any of the rest of that. They just grabbed the 666 and dropped the mic right there and said, that's it, it's all about Rome. But don't listen to that, it's not really true. The first beast comes up, you could consider that Roman emperor worship, but I consider it the Christianity once it was established under Constantine. So it took some time for this abomination to be set up, and that's what Daniel is kind of inferring there, that it took time, that it took time before the sacrifice ended and the abomination was set up. So that's how I'm thinking of things as far as the 3.5 years, 1260 days, all those are just like symbolic. They're meaning a certain set amount of time. Can't read them literally. It's saying basically this is a certain set amount of time, and it's not going to end until it ends. That's how I look at those time segments, and the confusion with 1260, 1290, 1335, 2300 days and nights and that kind of thing. They don't add up, and it does seal up Daniel to make it really confusing. There are some confusing interpretations on those dates, but I don't go with those. The one I'm really focused on, though, is that 70 weeks, like I said, and lining it up with Revelation. And so, at the end of the 70th week, or the end of the 69th week in Revelation 12 occurs, and so I believe we're in that 7-year period since then, and sure enough, all hell has broken loose, and we had eclipses that kind of bracketed both of these, at least as far as America goes, in 2017, and there's one coming in 2024, and so it's kind of pointing that way to me, at least as far as I'm concerned. And so Revelation 12 talks about the overview, what happened to the Jewish people, and but this first beast that comes up, like I said, is either Rome and without the Catholic Church, or it is Rome including the Catholic Church. But the second one that comes up, I believe, is talking about the Protestants, because the Protestants took the image that the Catholics worship, and they breathed, and they made an image out of that. It says, if you read it, it says they took that image and they made a statue, and then they breathed life in that statue and caused that statue to speak so that it could prophesy and that kind of thing. And so you're talking about the Protestant movement. That's one of the main differences between the Protestants and the Catholics. The Protestants believe Jesus is speaking today, speaks in their heart. They've got the false prophets. Every Sunday, they in church, they'll call fire down from heaven and do these miracles, and that's deceiving the people into believing in this image of worshiping a man who is standing in the temple up in heaven, who says that he's God. So the image that they're worshiping is it looks like Christianity to me. This had he survived a mortal wound. The whole world's wondering after him. You have to receive a mark, and that can be considered baptism as well as anything else. Baptism or the sacrament, those kind of rituals that you have to have in order to be saved. Those are the marks of the beast, of the things. You can also look at this in a political light, because it is both a country, a government, and a religion that are united. And so in some of the things that it's talking about, you can't buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast, those things could also be attributed to America and its sanctions. And when it's talking about, they've used sanctions as a weapon. That's been basically their biggest weapon right now that they're using. And so it's describing both. I mean, you could say that you can't buy or sell in America without using their image, because it's on all the dollars, it's on all of our money, and you do have a mark and a social security number. But I'm not necessarily saying that that's necessarily that particular interpretation. But I do believe that America, along with the Protestant movement, is the final eighth beast in Revelation. There's seven, remember? And then the eighth is the one that goes into perdition, but he's of the seven. So it's kind of cut from the same cloth. It's just that it's the Protestants being driving the American government instead of the Catholics driving the Roman government. This is the second beast that comes up out of the sea, and that's what it's doing. It's not an Antichrist individual person like that. I don't think we're going to see an Antichrist individual person unless Trump comes back to power. He could very well pull a lot of shit, and we know that's going to happen. So we have to watch out for that, of course. But so the storyline in Revelation is also mirroring the other prophets. Isaiah 53, it talks about the suffering servant. When you look in Revelation, you see the suffering servant also. The Lamb was slain from the beginning. You know, these are all things that are describing the suffering servant, and he suffers through his life. He suffers, and then he comes, according to Isaiah 53, and after his suffering, he sees the light. And in the Septuagint, this is even more clear, that after his suffering, he sees light, and then he makes his life a sacrifice. So it's not that he made his life a sacrifice and then he sees the light. No, it's the other way around. He suffers, and then after he sees the light, he understands that his life is a sacrifice. And so that's really what Isaiah 53 is talking about. And Isaiah 53 is talking about a real person that has children, and it says that he will see his offspring, and it refers that he lives to be an old age. You know? So it's not talking about Jesus, who was actually very much loved. He wasn't despised. He wasn't rejected, except for the last, perhaps by the rabbis and that kind of thing, but not necessarily by the people. We don't know that, and we're just assuming that. And even if it was only over a weekend, so it doesn't really count, I don't think. And you look at that along with scriptures in Zechariah that also paint a picture of this suffering servant, of the one who's wounded in the house of his friends. His own parents, his own mother say causes him to be killed because he says he's a prophet, or it's describing someone who's suffering a lot. And so that's the portrait that we have to see in Revelation as well. So Revelation is describing this person. And let me see if there's anything else I can... Okay, I'm going to give you some of my interpretations of key points to it. How about the bow and the crown that he has? I believe the bow and the crown is the same crown that the woman has, so it's going to be an arrangement of planets and stars, and it will be seen in its natal chart. So the bow is also a natal chart thing. I mean, these are the reason why I say the natal chart, because in astrology they have a language that speaks very clearly about this type of person is this and this and that, and these kind of aspects cause this and this and that. And one of the things that they have noted is that hard aspects cause a hard life. So whenever you're going to see this natal aspects of this Messiah, he's going to have the hard aspects of the guy in Isaiah 53. And the hard aspects are squares and conjunctions, exactly described. Squares and conjunctions. And when you look at a bow in the sky, if you have a bow in the sky, it means that you have planets on opposite ends of the horizon, one on the east, one on the west, and then above, overhead, you have your crown, would be the string of planets. And because they're on the east and the west, and the planets are straight overhead, they're in hard aspects. And what this would be, it basically is a triangle. And in his crown, he will have this triangle that will describe the sufferings he's gone through. When you look at Revelation, it says, it pretty much gives him his natal. He's going to be a Leo. We already know that, or he should be. If he's not a Leo, that would be a shock, because why not make him a Leo if he's going to be the king? And why not have the stars if they are given for signs and wonders? Why not have the signs and wonders also in his natal? And that's exactly what happens. So the signs and the wonders with him in his natal will be basically a T-square with a conjunction of planets in the sky, with the moon opposite Saturn, and it has to be this way, and then squared to all those planets up in the sky, high in the sky. And the reason why it is that way is because the moon is slain, and it's in Aries. So that moon has to be in Aries, and it has to be slain, which means it's square to all those other ones, square to everything, square to all 7 planets. If it's square and conjunct, square or opposite all 7 planets, then it's a slain moon, and the astrologers will understand it that way. And with Saturn on the other side, it shows the isolation and the shunning, all of those things. It would show that extreme shunning. So that's why I'm saying the bow and the crown tell his story just as much as the name written on his thigh that you see later, and the blood that's on his robe that you see later. The blood that's on his robe that you see later, you can see that in Zechariah. We're talking about the false prophet who's wounded in the house of his friends, and he says, I wasn't a prophet, and I was wounded in the house of my friends. And even his parents said, no, you lie, you said you're a prophet. They have him killed. So it's talking about an individual that's been suffering. And so when you see the blood on his robe, it's saying this person has gone through hell in this life and is suffering in this life, just as much as it did in the first one. Well, maybe not just as much. It's hard to. But anyway, so that's what I think it's saying. What else can I say about it? I'm just kind of giving you these overviews. So the code, okay, with Revelation 12, okay, I gave you the overview of how it gives you the overview of what happened to Israel after Jesus. But there's another way you can look at this, and it's also describing, like I said, his birth on this earth. And when this child is snatched up violently, that's the way the wording goes, into heaven at birth, before the woman gives birth. She's travailing. She's travailing, but before she gives birth, the dragon is there, poised to collect this child as soon as it's born, and so. But before it gives birth, the child is snatched up into heaven. And so, what is this describing? In natural terms, if we're describing a natural a birth, what we're describing is a C-section. So it's possible that it's describing a C-section birth and a separation from the mother for an early childhood for this individual. So that's where I'm kind of leaning, and it's also saying, let's see, where else was it? There's another. Let's see, I'm trying to. Okay, well, anyway, losing my thoughts. Anyway, so that's where the Revelation 12 is kind of looking. You can look at it in also describing the second coming and what his early life is like. But that one I'm not so sure about. But it doesn't. It makes more sense to me than a rapture. It's not the rapture. It's not, and it's not talking about the church being caught up to heaven or anything like that. So if it's talking about his second coming, then I believe it's talking about a C-section birth and the struggles that he went with. And so in a C-section birth, the devil, the dragon being poised to devour the child, if the C-section birth was an emergency, then that child could have been devoured right then and there. And so that's a possible explanation for that, but I'm not sure that I totally agree with my thoughts. I'm still kind of going through that. But anyway, I'm trying to think if there's something else. I think that can give you an idea. Like I said, in Revelation, it's talking about the two advents. So when it's talking about the two witnesses in chapter 11, I believe they're both talking about Jesus. Jesus already did preach for the 60 days or something, approximately around that. And he did fulfill those prophecies, kind of, you know what I mean? They do celebrate his death, and but more if they don't give presents for his death, maybe Easter eggs or something, but so it's a little bit not quite exactly they're not really passing out presents at his death, but they do celebrate his death, nevertheless. And so it is talking about that prophet, and I believe where it has that, and there's Dr. James Tabor has done some looking at Revelation, and he believes that there's some Christian interpolations in there, and you can see one really clearly in chapter 11, and also another place where it's talking about this angel who says, but where they're trying to make sure that the reader knows that it's not talking about Jesus. So it says, so in chapter 11 it says where these two witnesses are killed, and he goes, they were killed in Jerusalem where also our Lord was crucified. So that looks like an interpolation, and there's quite a few interpolations that I believe Revelation is really been heavily edited by a Christian writer, scribe, and I don't even think the first couple chapters were even in there. All those letters to the churches, I don't even, they're all bogus. As far as I'm concerned, they don't make sense. And the characterizations and the way it's wording, it doesn't sound like something God would say. And you just read it for yourself, and this doesn't sound like it. God, that's very, just, some of the things are horrific that are said in there, and you should look at those a little more closely. And you might come to the same conclusion as I do, that the Revelation was probably, I believe it was a Hebrew collection of prophecies by a single individual, but it was heavily edited later and made more Christianized, and perhaps even the 616 that you see may have been an interpolation, because they really wanted to pin the tail on the Nero donkey on that. They couldn't make Nero work, so they kept trying to say that Nero's going to come back from the dead and all that stuff. They really wanted to believe that Nero was the fulfillment of that, but he never quite fulfilled that. So you can't really look at it about that way. So I can't think of anything else right off the bat that I can add to this. Like I said, I've totally changed the script as far as what you're reading, how you're reading it. If you follow where I'm going with this, it's not talking about the rapture or anything like that, and it's showing a very human Jesus that does show up, and it is consistent with the other prophecies of Isaiah, of Zechariah, that show a very human Jesus coming back and suffering again, and it's not. Jesus didn't fulfill all of it. He didn't fulfill all of it. So anyway, that's all I got. If you have anything, questions or anything like that, that I forgot, there's a lot of stuff that I'm probably forgetting here that are in my mind that I just kind of wanted to do this off the cuff, and sorry I don't have the expertise to put up Bible verses for you and highlight them and everything, but I'm assuming that you're already familiar with this stuff and you don't really need me to read these scriptures to you. As far as interpretations go, I really go with the Septuagint when I can, especially with the Isaiah prophecies and the Old Testament prophecies, because I think it's probably a little more accurate than the Masoretic. Masoretic's been shown to have been changed, and so I don't trust the Masoretic very much, not completely. I'll look at it. Sometimes there's the Septuagint isn't really clear, and so sometimes the Masoretic's a little more clear on most things, but almost always, as far as the Septuagint goes, when it comes to Isaiah, I prefer the Septuagint. So that's my only opinion. That's all I'm going to say for now. If you have any questions, just post them in the thing. I don't care if you like and subscribe or anything like that. I'm not trying to get more subscribers, but pass it on. It's fine. I want people to know about this information, and if you have questions about it, get to me. Leave a reply, and I'll get back to you. Anyway, thanks. I hope you're doing okay, and hang in there through these hard times. I know it's tough figuring out what's going on. I'm not down on Jesus. I'm not down on Christianity or Judaism. I think they can be restored, but they have to be basically dismantled and rebuilt again. And I think when you look at in Revelation, when you're talking about the Mystery Babylon to me that's all about, let's talk about Mystery Babylon. I didn't talk about that. Mystery Babylon is basically, I believe it's Jerusalem. It's the only place where the prophets have been killed. You know, it's been always been called a whore. You know, and it is right now today. And these religions that have made it their home, made it their capital. They've made Jerusalem like the authority over all. These governments that the woman sits on many governments. So we're talking about any government that has an Abrahamic base to it, like the Muslim, Christian, Judaism. Any government that has that as a moral base is something where it's where the woman sits. She's sitting on that hill. She sits on many waters, on many capitals, and so that's talking about Babylon. And the reason why it's called Mystery Babylon is because this whole clusterfuck started in Babylon when the Jews were expelled there. Judaism married, slept with Zoroastrianism and Hellenism, and that's when the duality started coming in. That's when you started having devil and Satan was invented. So all these things are inventions of later period that mostly came out of Babylon. And Babylon was where the rabbinical thing was created. And that's where the beginning. So when it says Mystery Babylon, it's talking about all these religions that kind of came out of this unholy marriage between Judaism and the Zoroastrianism that was the religion of the Persians, and Hellenism, the Greek thing. So it's all a combination of that. So when it's talking about Mystery Babylon, it's talking about everything, and it literally did happen in Babylon. So I think that's about everything. I can't explain a lot of the little detail stuff, like what's this vial, what's that bowl, and all that stuff. I think a lot of it will shake out later. A lot of it is fantastical language that, like I said, it's not literal. The lake of fire is not a literal burning, torturing hell. I believe it's representing the annihilation, or it's talking about reincarnation. I'm a strong believer in reincarnation, and I believe that Jesus was a reincarnation of Adam. And when he said he's the Son of God, he was saying he's the original Son of Adam. And Son of Man means Son of Adam. So I believe he believes that before Abraham was, I am, meant that he was existing before, not necessarily God. So if Adam has been reincarnating, then the suffering from the beginning of the earth, from the foundation of the earth in Revelation, is talking about Adam and how he's been suffering. And you follow that timeline, follow that same concept in through Jacob, who becomes Israel. And Jacob is the suffering servant who's been cohabiting with Israel, I believe, throughout all of his incarnations in one form or another. I think he came back as prophets here and there. You know, these are all different lives of the same person, Elijah. He could very well have been the same person, you know, Enoch, whoever that was, may very well have been the same exact person who has been reincarnating and suffering since the beginning. So that's what I believe it's talking about. That's the secret of the whole Jewish thing. It wasn't about the Jewish people as a nation. It's about that one individual, and the test was on him. God has a covenant with David only, not with the people of Israel. Their covenant is conditional, and I think they pretty much broke that. And so there is no covenant really with Israel right now. Not that he won't. It does say in the prophets that he will again take them up. So that's possible. I think that's possible. And I hope for it, because, you know, they have suffered a lot, and I don't think they're any better than anybody else, but it would be nice to kind of give them a consolation here and give them, they need to be acknowledged for having carried the prophets with them and brought the prophets into this modern age, because the prophets themselves will convince the world that there is a God. And just as I'm saying, Daniel and Revelation are so powerful, telling what's happening right now, that I think it needs to be looked at. So anyway, I kept this longer than I expected. Sorry about that, and sorry about all the rambling. I have so much to say, and I tend to go off track, and sorry about that. But if you have any questions, just post them in the thing. I don't care if you like and subscribe, but I appreciate it if you do. Anyway, thanks.